The world's most powerful military had a gap. A cheap, embarrassing, terrifying gap. And the only country on Earth that knew how to close it was the same country Russia has been trying to erase from the map for 4 years. If that sentence doesn't make sense yet, stay with me, because by the end of this, the entire global chessboard is going to look completely different to you. Drop a comment right now. Did you know Ukraine was operating in the Middle East? Because most people have absolutely no idea this is happening. Through the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, flows 20% of the world's entire daily oil supply. Every supertanker, every energy shipment, every barrel that keeps economies from collapsing, it all squeezes through that single corridor. And Iran has spent decades building a strategy designed to shut it down. Not by starting a war, just by making the threat of war expensive enough that the global shipping network reroutes itself without a single Iranian weapon being fired. Insurance premiums spike, tankers avoid transit, oil prices detonate. The damage is done without a headline. That strategy, patient, cheap, and devastatingly effective, just ran directly into something it was never designed to face. 12,000 miles from Ukraine's front line, in the desert heat of Saudi Arabia and the contested waters of the Persian Gulf, Ukraine has quietly deployed what may be the most consequential military intervention of the 21st century. And it isn't troops. It isn't tanks. It isn't the kind of power anyone was watching for. It is 10,000 acoustic sensors buried in the sand. It is 5 mine-hunting warships sailing toward the world's most dangerous waterway. It is over 200 combat-hardened drone operators standing in Gulf deserts, teaching armies of some of the wealthiest nations on Earth how to defeat the exact weapons those nations have been terrified of for years. Share this video before you keep watching, because what you're about to hear does not appear in any Western press release, and it changes everything you think you know about who actually holds power in this world right now. To understand why Ukraine's arrival in the Gulf matters so completely, you first have to understand the specific nightmare that has been keeping American commanders awake since the Hormuz crisis began. Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia is not just another military installation. It is the operational brain of American air power across the entire Middle East. CENTCOM runs its regional air campaigns from here. Boeing E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft, the flying command centers that give American forces their air picture, operate from this base. F-35 fighters worth hundreds of millions of dollars are stationed here. 13 KC-135 aerial refueling tankers, the systems that extend the range of every strike aircraft in the theater, are positioned on its runways. Without the AWACS, American air superiority goes partially blind. Without the tankers, long-range operations lose their reach. Prince Sultan is the jugular vein of American military power in the region, and it had a vulnerability that the most expensive air defense systems ever built had not solved. Iranian Shahed drones. Not sophisticated weapons, not precision-guided munitions designed in classified laboratories. Slow, cheap, one-way attack drones that fly at low altitude in swarms, deliberately designed to overwhelm air defense systems built for a completely different threat environment. Patriot missile batteries, engineered for ballistic missiles at altitude, struggle against targets flying below their optimal engagement range in numbers large enough to exhaust interceptor inventories. An attack last March that targeted an E-3 Sentry on a dark night over a Saudi base pushed the Pentagon toward an uncomfortable realization. The most expensive military force in human history had a gap. And closing that gap required expertise that no American defense contract had produced. Ukraine had 4 years of fighting Iran's exact weapons on Ukrainian soil. And out of that 4 years came something no laboratory could replicate. Combat-proven doctrine for defeating Shahed swarms at scale, in real conditions, against an adversary actively adapting its attack patterns. The same patterns Iranian forces were now deploying against Gulf infrastructure. The result was Ukraine's Sky Fortress initiative, backed by its Defense Innovation Program. What it produced broke every assumption of conventional military procurement. Acoustic sensors. Microphone-based detection arrays that capture the specific engine noise signature of drones flying too low for radar to reach. Originally developed from adapted consumer microphone components, these evolved into specialized military hardware refined enough to distinguish a desert bird's wing beat from a Shahed 136 engine signature in 1/10 of a second. More than 10,000 of these sensors are now deployed across Saudi Arabia, creating a listening network that covers ground no radar system can see. Each sensor feeds data continuously to an AI-supported command center that processes thousands of simultaneous acoustic inputs and identifies threat signatures in real time. The AI filters desert wind noise, ignores generator hum, discriminates between vehicle traffic and an incoming swarm, and when it detects a threat, calculates route, speed, and probable target within seconds. The sensors are invisible, buried behind sand dunes, concealed in abandoned structures, mounted on base perimeter fences in configurations no observer would identify as a defense system. That invisibility is not incidental, it is architectural. A detection system that cannot be located cannot be destroyed. When the threat is identified, what Ukraine deploys against it is not a Patriot missile worth millions of dollars. It is an interceptor drone. Ukrainian-made Marup systems or RTX Coyote interceptors, cheap, fast, guided by the same AI network that detected the incoming swarm, diving into the threat formation in coordinated attack patterns. Cheap weapons defeating cheap weapons. Intelligence defeating mass. And right now, American soldiers are receiving training on this system from Ukrainian instructors who learned it by doing it, under fire, against the real thing. The world's most powerful military is being taught by a nation fighting for its survival. That is the strategic reality no press release has captured. Every successful Iranian drone attack on Gulf infrastructure generates headlines. Headlines generate risk assessments. Risk assessments generate investment flight. Investment flight costs Gulf economies billions that no oil revenue replaces quickly. Ukraine understood this because Ukraine lived it. Every Russian strike on Ukrainian infrastructure that succeeded generated global pressure, uncertainty, and psychological damage far beyond the physical destruction. The lesson Ukraine learned, and is now teaching, is that the most strategically valuable defense system is the one that makes the enemy's attacks invisible by making them fail so completely and so quietly they produce no signal at all. Iran's swarm strategy depends on creating fear. Fear requires visible impact. Ukraine's acoustic interception network is designed specifically to deny Iran that visible impact. No successful strike, no headline, no fear, no leverage. Iran's most cost-effective weapon is being quietly neutralized in the Saudi desert by technology that started as repurposed consumer microphone components. Now look at the water. The Strait of Hormuz's narrowest point is 21 miles. Through that corridor flows a fifth of all the oil on Earth, every single day. Iran has pre-positioned contact mines in those shipping lanes, passive, cheap, patient weapons capable of remaining dormant for months before activating against vessels whose draft limits where they can navigate. Iran's calculation has always been the same. You do not need to sink 100 ships to control the strait. You need to create the credible threat of sinking one. That threat alone drives insurance premiums to levels that make commercial transit economically irrational. When the cost of insuring a single Hormuz voyage exceeds the value of the cargo, the global shipping network reroutes, and the supply disruption happens without Iran firing a single weapon. Ukraine just sent 4 Minehunter warships to Hormuz, with a 5th arriving from the Netherlands. These are not improvised vessels. The British-built Churs and Cherna are Sandown-class ships optimized specifically for mine hunting, featuring hull materials with near-zero magnetic signatures that prevent triggering the very mines they are searching for. The Belgian and Dutch-built Mariupol and Melitopol are Alkmaar-class vessels, equipped with remotely operated underwater vehicles and advanced magnetic acoustic scanning systems, capable of mapping individual mines without requiring a human diver to approach them. These ships defeat mines at distance. Unmanned submarine vehicles approach detected targets, plant remotely detonated charges, and trigger the mine from a position of safety. Operations requiring weeks of dangerous close-contact work using conventional methods can be completed in hours. No Ukrainian sailor needs to be in the water when the explosion occurs. Ukrainian naval officers are not in this operation as consultants. They are steering strategy as the dominant authority in the room. Because here is the fact that changes the entire picture. The Ukrainian Navy is the most mine-experienced naval force on the planet. Russia seeded the Black Sea with thousands of mines during the war. Ukraine's naval forces developed mine-clearing doctrine in real operational conditions against real Russian mines in waters where failure meant the loss of vessels and crews. That accumulated operational knowledge represents an institutional expertise that no other navy currently operating in Hormuz possesses. Iran knows exactly who just arrived at its doorstep. And behind all of this, behind the sensors, the mine hunters, the drone operators on the ground, Ukraine signed 10-year comprehensive defense agreements with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. Not equipment sales, not maintenance contracts, full security partnerships, joint production facilities, advanced electronic warfare software development, AI-supported air defense integration. The institutional military relationships that transform both parties' capabilities simultaneously. The detail that sealed these agreements was not technology, it was attitude. Gulf states have spent decades navigating American defense procurement timelines. Congressional approval, diplomatic review, technology transfer restrictions, export control compliance, bureaucratic timelines measured in years from initial request to operational deployment. Ukraine's representatives sat across from Gulf military planners, looked at the requirements, looked at the timeline, and said they could have the system operational and training underway the next morning. Not in months, not after a congressional review cycle. Tomorrow morning. That operational urgency, forged through 4 years of fighting where delay meant casualties rather than missed milestones, has become one of Ukraine's most valuable strategic assets. Gulf states facing real threats on real timelines do not want the world's best defense system on a 5-year delivery schedule. They want the most capable available system operational before the next drone swarm appears. Ukraine delivers on that timeline because Ukraine has no other timeline. The Mora V5 and Seabuy unmanned surface vessels complete the naval architecture. These are the systems that drove the Russian Black Sea Fleet from Crimea to Novorossiysk. That sank Russian warships at ranges and in conditions Russian commanders had never calculated as threats. That disabled a Russian submarine. That demonstrated definitively that a technologically inferior naval force can achieve strategic objectives against a conventionally superior opponent when its unmanned systems are designed and operated correctly. In the Strait of Hormuz, these drones patrol around supertankers as invisible defensive escorts. Their speed, 50 miles per hour, gives them intercept capability against Revolutionary Guard speedboats that conventional escort vessels struggle to match. And the capability that makes them genuinely transformative, the Mora can launch aerial interceptor drones from its deck. A naval drone that is simultaneously an aerial drone carrier provides defense against surface threats and aerial threats at the same time. Iranian Shaheds approaching from the air and Iranian fastboats approaching from the water, without requiring separate assets for each dimension. Multiple Moras operating in coordinated formation around a protected tanker, each covering a different sector of the threat envelope, sharing targeting data through a networked system. You cannot overwhelm a network defense with a swarm when the defense is itself a network swarm. Now look at what this means for Russia, because this is where the full picture snaps into focus. For years, Moscow built its Middle Eastern arms export strategy around a single proposition. Russian systems, specifically the S-400 air defense platform, offered an alternative to American weapons that did not come with congressional review, diplomatic conditions, or technology transfer restrictions. Gulf states wanting capability without political strings found Russia a willing and efficient supplier. That market is now being captured by Ukraine. The country Russia invaded to prevent from becoming a competitor is now competing directly for the defense contracts of nations Russia was selling weapons to. Every Ukrainian 10-year deal signed with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar is a Russian contract that will not be signed. Every Ukrainian acoustic sensor deployed at Prince Sultan is a Russian system that was not selected. Every Ukrainian mine hunter operating in Hormuz is a demonstration of capability that Russia cannot credibly offer, because Russia's navy is currently in retreat in the Black Sea from the same Ukrainian systems being marketed to Gulf monarchies as their security solution. Russia is losing the Middle Eastern defense market to the country it designated for subjugation. Russia is watching its naval deterrence collapse in the Black Sea while simultaneously watching Gulf governments choose Ukrainian technology over Russian alternatives. Russia is seeing the nation it tried to erase transform into a global military technology exporter, competing in markets Moscow had treated as secure. And this is not simply a commercial loss. It is a signal to every government in the world about what military credibility actually means in the current era. Military credibility used to correlate with size, largest army, biggest defense budget, most aircraft carriers. These metrics made sense when systems were rarely tested in conditions approximating actual combat. That era is ending. What Gulf states discovered when evaluating Ukraine's offerings against competing alternatives was that combat-proven, in real conditions, against real adversaries, with real countermeasures actively adapting, is worth more than any specification sheet. A drone interceptor system that has defeated thousands of Shahed attacks in Ukrainian airspace carries a different assurance than a system that performed perfectly on a test range. A mine-clearing doctrine developed through 4 years of operational experience against real Russian naval mines carries a different assurance than doctrine developed through simulation. Ukraine has 4 years of the most intensive modern warfare ever recorded serving as its product demonstration. No competitor can replicate that demonstration, and the world's richest states are responding accordingly. Over 200 Ukrainian drone operators and military experts are actively deployed on the ground across Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Jordan. These combat-hardened soldiers are teaching local forces the operational fine details of drone warfare, acoustic detection, countermeasure doctrine, and naval defense that no Western defense contractor can teach, because no Western defense contractor developed these skills under fire. Ukraine entered this war as a nation entirely dependent on others for its survival, dependent on Western ammunition, financial transfers, and political support to maintain the coalition, keeping Russian pressure from becoming overwhelming. That dependency has not disappeared. But something fundamental has changed in the nature of those relationships. Ukraine is no longer only a recipient, it is a provider, offering capabilities its partners cannot provide for themselves, to customers paying generously for access. Gulf states need Ukraine's acoustic detection network. They need Ukraine's mine-clearing expertise. They need Ukraine's drone warfare doctrine. They need the 200 operators on the ground teaching skills no one else can teach. Ukraine needs Gulf oil, direct cash transfers, missile technology, and energy supply guarantees protecting Ukrainian heating through the winters Russia has tried to make unbearable. This is not charity. It is a partnership between equals, each providing what the other cannot obtain elsewhere. That equality is a fundamentally different strategic position than the one Ukraine occupied in February 2022. Step back and look at the complete picture of what Ukraine has built in the Gulf in a matter of months. In the air over Saudi Arabia, 10,000 acoustic sensors listening for threats that radar cannot see, processing through AI systems that classify in fractions of a second, feeding targeting data to interceptor drone swarms that defeat Iranian Shahed attacks before they generate a headline. American soldiers trained by Ukrainian instructors on a system that the world's largest defense budget had not produced. In the water, 4 minehunter warships operating with hull signatures below the detection threshold of the mines they hunt, crewed by the most mine-experienced naval force on Earth, clearing the threat environment that Iran's most strategic passive weapon creates in the Strait, with a 5th vessel arriving from the Netherlands. On the surface, Ukrainian naval drones patrolling tanker convoys at 50 miles per hour, providing simultaneous air and surface threat response in wolfpack formations that mirror Iran's offensive swarm tactics and defeat them defensively. Behind all of it, decade-long, multi-billion-dollar defense partnerships creating joint production facilities for the next generation of these systems, integrating Ukrainian electronic warfare software into Gulf defense architectures, positioning Ukraine not as a weapons supplier, but as a co-developer of the security doctrine that will define the region through the 2030s. There is one final dimension that gives the entire picture its ultimate weight. Every capability Ukraine is deploying in the Gulf was born from necessity in Ukraine. The acoustic sensors that detect Shaheds before radar sees them were developed because Shaheds were killing Ukrainians. The mine hunters clearing Hormuz were developed because Russian mines were killing Ukrainian sailors. The naval drones that intercept fast boats while simultaneously launching aerial interceptors were developed because Ukraine needed to defeat a navy that vastly outnumbered it. Necessity produced something that billions of defense budget dollars and decades of peacetime procurement had not. It produced the precise answer to Iran's strategy. Not by accident, not by institutional design, by the brutal, compounding education of real war. Iran built its Hormuz strategy around decades of accumulated threat infrastructure, naval mines, fast boat swarms, Shahed drone production at scale, each element designed to impose asymmetric costs that conventional naval power could not efficiently counter. Ukraine spent 4 years building counters to every single one of those elements, in combat, against Russian versions of the exact same weapons, refined through thousands of operational engagements, adapted through failure and success, in conditions no peacetime testing environment can replicate. The Strait of Hormuz will not be closed by Iran, not because Iran chose restraint, but because Ukraine made Iran's strategy impotent, quietly, systematically, and at a price Gulf states were more than willing to pay. If that reframed how you see this war and what power actually looks like in the 21st century, hit the like button and share this with someone who still thinks this conflict is just about trenches and artillery. We analyze this daily, and the picture keeps getting bigger. And if you want to understand the moves that never make the headlines, subscribe. This is exactly the kind of story we exist to tell.